In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, where love is a currency and secrets are the deadliest assets, a billionaire's pregnant wife is brutally cast out onto the street from their lavish penthouse. Left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, her life takes an unimaginable turn. As she weeps on the cold pavement, a mysterious force begins to move mountains for her. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a tale of an astonishing secret, a hidden benefactor with a shocking agenda, and the ultimate power play that saw an entire New York City skyscraper bought just for her. The penthouse at 157, the glittering needle piercing the Manhattan skyline, was more than a home. It was a kingdom. For Anya, it was a gilded cage, albeit one with breathtaking floor-to-ceiling views of Central Park. From this vantage point, the city seemed a toy, a miniature world she could hold in the palm of her hand. But her own world felt just as controlled, just as subject to the whims of its creator. Her husband, the formidable and devastatingly handsome Julian Croft. Julian wasn't just wealthy, he was a titan of industry, a man whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in the boardrooms of Wall Street. He had built his empire from the ground up, a fact he never let anyone, especially Anya, forget. Theirs was a whirlwind romance, a story the tabloids had devoured with insatiable hunger. A young unknown artist swept off her feet by the city's most eligible bachelor. The wedding was a spectacle, a symphony of extravagance held at the iconic Plaza Hotel, with a guest list that read like a who's who of global power. For 5 years, Anya had played her part to perfection. The demure, elegant wife, a stunning accessory on Julian's arm at countless galas and charity events. She had traded her paintbrushes and canvases for couture gowns and diamond necklaces. She had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of New York high society, a world where smiles were weapons and friendships were transactional. She had even convinced herself she was happy that the intoxicating rush of their lifestyle was a worthy substitute for the quiet passion of her art. The first cracks in the flawless facade of their marriage had appeared subtly. A dismissive wave of his hand when she mentioned wanting to set up a small studio in a spare room. A condescending smile when she offered an opinion on his latest business venture. Julian had not married a partner. He had acquired a beautiful possession, one he expected to remain pristine and silent on its pedestal. But everything changed the day Anya discovered she was pregnant. A tiny, fluttering heartbeat on a grainy ultrasound screen had ignited a spark of hope in her that she hadn't realized was dormant. This child, their child, would be the bridge that finally connected their two disparate worlds. It would be the one thing that was truly theirs, not just another of Julian's acquisitions. She planned the reveal meticulously. A private dinner in the penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like a sea of scattered diamonds. She wore a simple, elegant white dress, a stark contrast to the vibrant, abstract painting she had secretly been working on for weeks, a piece she planned to give him as a gift, along with the news. Julian arrived late, as he often did, his face a mask of weary indifference. He loosened his tie, his eyes already on his tablet, scrolling through market reports. "Long day," he grunted, barely glancing at the exquisitely set table. Anya's carefully constructed confidence began to waver. "I have something to tell you, Julian," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Can it wait, Anya? I have a conference call with Tokyo in an hour." "No," she insisted, her hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach. "It can't wait." She took a deep breath and told him. The words tumbled out full of hope and nervous excitement. She spoke of their future, of a family, of a love that would finally be more than just a performance. When she finished, the silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Julian's expression was unreadable. He slowly placed his tablet on the table, his gaze cold and analytical. "You're pregnant," he stated the words flat and devoid of emotion. "Yes?" she whispered, a smile finally breaking through her anxiety. "Isn't it wonderful?" He stared at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. Then he did something that chilled her to the bone. He laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy or surprise, but a short, sharp bark of derision. "Wonderful!" He sneered, the word dripping with contempt. "You think this is wonderful?" Anya's smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, rising from his chair and pacing the room like a stalked panther, "that this is a disaster, a complication I neither need nor want." The blood drained from Anya's face. "A complication, Julian. This is our child." "It's a liability," he shot back, his voice rising. "My life is perfectly calibrated, Anya. My business, my public image, my personal life. Everything is exactly as it should be. A child throws a wrench in all of that. The noise, the mess, the demands on my time. It's an inconvenience." Tears pricked at Anya's eyes. "An inconvenience. That's all this is to you." "What did you expect?" he scoffed. "That I would suddenly transform into a doting father, that we would become some sort of idyllic happy family. That was never part of the arrangement, Anya. You were supposed to be the beautiful, uncomplicated part of my life. Not this." He gestured vaguely at her midsection, his disgust palpable. The cruelty of his words was like a physical blow. The gilded kaya she had lived in for 5 years suddenly felt suffocating, its golden bars turning to cold, hard steel. "The arrangement," she echoed, her voice trembling with a mixture of hurt and fury. "I thought this was a marriage." "It's a partnership," he corrected her, his tone sharp and clinical. "And you have just violated the terms of our agreement." "By getting pregnant?" she cried, her composure finally shattering. "How could you be so heartless? Heartless!" He repeated, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "I'm a pragmatist, Anya, and pragmatically this is a problem that needs to be solved." He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her as he surveyed his kingdom below. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. He'll draw up the papers." Anya's heart stopped. "What papers?" He turned to face her, his expression as cold and unforgiving as the winter sky. "Our divorce, of course, and a non-disclosure agreement. You will be well compensated for your time naturally. A generous settlement enough to ensure your silence and your discretion." The room began to spin. "You're divorcing me?" "Because I'm pregnant." "I'm terminating a contract that has been breached," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "As for the issue," he hesitated, his gaze flickering once more to her stomach. "You will take care of it. Discreetly." The implication hit her with the force of a tidal wave. "Take care of it," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "You want me to get rid of our baby?" "It's not a baby, Anya," he said, his voice dangerously low. "It's a fetus, a collection of cells that threatens to derail my life. You will terminate the pregnancy. It's the only logical solution." Anya stared at him, at this man she had once thought she loved, and saw a stranger, a monster cloaked in a bespoke suit. The love she had harbored for him, the hope she had held on to so desperately withered and died in that instant, replaced by a cold, hard knot of revulsion. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. I won't. Julian's eyes flashed with anger. Don't be a fool, Anya. You have no idea what you're up against. I don't care, she said, a newfound strength surging through her veins. I will not murder my child for your convenience. For a moment she thought he might strike her. He took a step towards her, his face contorted in a mask of rage. But then he seemed to collect himself, a chillingly calm expression settling over his features. Very well, he said, his voice deceptively soft. You've made your choice. Now you can live with the consequences. He walked to the grand marble-clad entrance of the penthouse and gestured to the two imposing security guards who were always stationed there. Pack a bag for Mrs. Croft, he commanded, his voice ringing with absolute authority. One bag, she's leaving. The guardsmen who had always treated her with deference and respect now looked at her with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. One of them, a burly man named Frank, moved towards their bedroom. Anya was in a state of shock, her mind struggling to process the rapid-fire succession of events. Julian, you can't do this, she pleaded, her voice cracking. This is my home. It was never your home, Anya, he said, his voice as sharp as glass. It's my property, and you are no longer welcome here. He pulled out his phone and began to type, his attention already elsewhere. You have 5 minutes. Frank returned with a single small suitcase, one she had used for a weekend trip years ago. He had thrown in a random assortment of her belongings. A few dresses, a pair of shoes, some toiletries. It was a pathetic collection, a stark representation of how little she truly owned in this life of extravagant illusion. Julian, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Don't do this. Think about our baby. He didn't even look up from his phone. The baby is your problem now, he said coldly. You chose it over me, over this life. He finally raised his eyes, his gaze sweeping over her with a look of utter disdain. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. The security guards flanked her, their presence a silent, immovable force. They escorted her to the private elevator, the doors closing with a soft, final hiss, sealing her off from the life she had known. As the elevator descended the 90 floors, Anya stared at her reflection in the polished bronze walls, a woman in a beautiful white dress, her face streaked with tears, clutching a small suitcase. A queen banished from her castle. The elevator doors opened into the opulent lobby, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and fresh flowers. The doorman, a man who had greeted her with a warm smile every day for 5 years, now averted his gaze, his face a mask of professional neutrality. He held the door open for her, and she stepped out into the harsh, unforgiving glare of the New York City night. The cold air hit her like a slap in the face, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled perfection of the penthouse. The sounds of the city, which had always seemed so distant and muted from her perch on the 90th floor, were now a deafening cacophony of blaring horns, shouting voices and wailing sirens. She stood on the pavement outside 157, the monumental skyscraper looming over her like a silent, indifferent giant. She was homeless, pregnant, and alone with nothing to her name but a suitcase full of clothes and a heart full of shattered dreams. The tears came then hot and unrestrained, a torrent of grief and despair. She sank to her knees on the cold, unforgiving concrete, her body shaking with sobs, oblivious to the curious glances of passers-by. She had been kicked out of the penthouse, but as she wept in the shadow of the tower, a plan was already in motion, set in place by a secret benefactor who had been watching, waiting for this very moment. A benefactor who was about to buy her the entire tower. The first few hours were a blur of disorientation and raw, unadulterated pain. Anya wandered the streets of Manhattan, like a ghost, her designer heels so accustomed to plush carpets and chauffeured cars, now clicking awkwardly on the grimy pavement. The city that had once been her playground had transformed into a labyrinth of indifferent faces and towering buildings that seemed to mock her fallen state. She eventually found herself in a small, dingy hotel in a less fashionable part of town, the kind of place she hadn't set foot in since she was a struggling artist with more dreams than dollars. The room was cramped and smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. The threadbare carpet was a world away from the hand-knotted silk rugs of the penthouse. As she sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. She had no one. Her family, a modest, middle-class couple from Ohio, had been so intimidated by Julian's wealth and power that their relationship with Anya had become strained and distant. They had seen her marriage as a fairy tale, a life beyond their wildest imaginations. How could she possibly tell them that the prince was a monster, and the castle had crumbled? Her friends, the glamorous, air-kissing women of her social circle, were Julian's friends first and foremost. Their loyalty, she knew, was tied to his influence and his bank account. To them, she was now a liability, a social pariah, a cautionary tale to be whispered about over champagne and canapés. The next morning, the news broke. It wasn't in the gossip columns of the tabloids, not yet. Julian was too meticulous for that. Instead, it was a carefully worded statement from his company's PR department, released to the financial press. Julian Croft and Anya Croft have amicably decided to separate, it read. They ask for privacy during this difficult time. Amicably? Anya scoffed, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. There was nothing amicable about being thrown out onto the street in the middle of the night. Her phone, which had been ominously silent since she left the penthouse, suddenly buzzed with a notification. It was a wire transfer. A substantial sum enough to live comfortably for a few years had been deposited into her personal account. It was the generous settlement Julian had spoken of. Hush money, a final insulting transaction to close the books on their marriage. Attached to the notification was a crisp, impersonal email from a law firm she didn't recognize. It contained a single attachment, a PDF of the divorce papers and the non-disclosure agreement. The terms were brutal. She was to relinquish all claims to their marital assets, to never speak publicly or privately about their marriage, or the reasons for its dissolution, and most chillingly, to resolve the issue of the pregnancy in a timely and confidential manner. A wave of nausea sharper than her morning sickness washed over her. He was actually trying to legally obligate her to have an abortion. The audacity, the sheer unadulterated arrogance of it was breathtaking. A fool ignited within her a flicker of the defiance that had made her refuse his demand in the first place. She would not be bought. She would not be silenced, and she would most certainly not harm her child. She deleted the email without a second thought, the act a small but significant rebellion. Meanwhile, back in the rarefied air of the 90th floor, Julian was orchestrating his own narrative. He convened an emergency meeting with his inner circle, his shark-like lawyer, Arthur Vance, his ruthlessly efficient head of PR. A woman named Diana, who could spin straw into gold, and his younger brother Marcus, a man who lived in Julian's shadow, his life a testament to wasted potential and hedonistic pursuits. "She's out," Julian announced, his voice clipped and devoid of emotion. "The settlement has been sent, the papers are with her. It's done." Arthur Vance, a man whose face seemed permanently etched in a disapproving scowl, steepled his fingers. "And the other?" matter. The pregnancy. She's refusing. Julian admitted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. She's being sentimental, emotional. Emotional is dangerous. Diana interjected, her sharp eyes scanning her tablet. It's unpredictable. What's our angle? We stick to the amicable separation story, Julian instructed. We leak a few carefully selected tidbits to our contacts at the post. Irreconcilable differences. They grew apart the pressures of my work. The usual clichés. We paint her as a tragic figure, not a victim. Someone who simply couldn't handle the demands of my world. Marcus, who had been lounging on a plush sofa, swirling a glass of amber liquid, let out a low whistle. Cold, bro. Even for you. Threw her out because she's pregnant. That's a new low. Julian's gaze snapped to his brother, his eyes like chips of ice. Stay out of this, Marcus. You have no idea what's at stake. I know you're a bastard, Marcus retorted, taking a defiant sip of his drink. She was a good woman, Julian. The only decent person you've had in your life in years. She was a distraction. Julian shot back, his voice rising. A beautiful, expensive distraction. And now she's a complication that I am handling. So what's the real reason? Marcus pressed a rare spark of seriousness in his eyes. It's not just about the inconvenience of a baby. I know you, Julian. This is about something else. Julian's jaw tightened. He wouldn't admit the real reason, not even to his own brother. The truth was far more complex, a secret buried deep beneath layers of ambition and fear. It was about a legacy, a dynasty he was trying to build, and a past he was desperate to keep buried. A child, his child was a threat to all of it. A wild card, a potential heir who could one day unravel everything he had so carefully constructed. The reason, Julian said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, is my business, and you would do well to remember that. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air, a stark reminder of the power Julian wielded over everyone in his orbit, including his own family. While Julian was busy spinning his web of lies, Anya was taking the first tentative steps towards reclaiming her life. She found a small furnished apartment in a quiet, unassuming neighborhood, a place where no one would know her name or her history. She used a fraction of Julian's settlement to pay the rent, the act filling her with a bitter sense of irony. She was using his money to build a life he had tried to destroy. She also made an appointment with a lawyer, not a high-powered celebrity attorney, but a woman named Helen, who ran a small independent practice focused on women's rights. Helen was the antithesis of Arthur Vance. She was warm, empathetic, and radiated a quiet strength that Anya found instantly reassuring. Anya told her everything: the gilded cage, the emotional abuse, the cruel ultimatum, the shocking expulsion from her home. Helen listened patiently, her expression growing more and more grim with each detail. What he has done, Helen said, her voice laced with outrage, is not just morally reprehensible, it's illegal. He cannot coerce you into terminating a pregnancy, and a non-disclosure agreement signed under such duress is highly contestable. For the first time in days, a sliver of hope pierced through Anya's despair. So I can fight him. We can certainly try, Helen said, her tone cautious. But you need to understand, Anya. Julian Croft is one of the most powerful men in this city. He will use every resource at his disposal to crush you. He will try to paint you as an unstable, gold-digging opportunist. He will drag your name through the mud. It will be a brutal public battle. Anya's heart sank. A public battle was the last thing she wanted. All she wanted was to be left alone, to raise her child in peace. "What if I don't want to fight him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What if I just want him to leave me alone?" Helen gave her a sad, knowing smile. Men like Julian Croft don't just leave people alone, Anya. They control them. The only way to be free of him is to have your own power. The words echoed in Anya's mind. Power. It was something she had never had, something she had never even thought to want. She had been content to live in the shadow of Julian's power, never realizing that the shadow was a cage. As she left Helen's office, a sense of weary resignation settled over her. The fight seemed too daunting, the odds too insurmountable. She walked through the unfamiliar streets of her new neighborhood, her hand resting on her belly, a silent promise to the life growing inside her. She would protect this child, even if it meant living a life in the shadows, constantly looking over her shoulder. That evening, as she was unpacking the few belongings, she had her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. "Anya Croft," a man's voice asked. It was a voice she didn't recognize, smooth and professional, with an undercurrent of something she couldn't quite place. "Yes," she answered cautiously. "Who is this?" "My name is Benjamin Carter," the man said. "I am a representative for a private benefactor who has taken an interest in your situation." Anya's blood ran cold. Was this another of Julian's tricks? Another lawyer? Another threat? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Please, Mrs. Croft," the man said, his tone calm and reassuring. "This is not what you think. My client is an admirer of yours, a supporter, and they are aware of the injustice that has been done to you." Anya was speechless. An admirer. A supporter. It made no sense. "My client," Benjamin Carter continued, his voice dropping slightly, "has instructed me to make you an offer of assistance, a way to secure your future and the future of your child in a way that will ensure you are never at the mercy of a man like Julian Croft again." Anya's mind raced, trying to process the bizarre turn of events. "What kind of offer?" "My client is a person of considerable means," Carter explained, "and they believe in righting wrongs. They have been following your husband's career for some time, and they are displeased with his methods. They see in you an opportunity to restore a certain balance." "I don't understand," Anya said, her confusion mounting. "What do you want from me?" "We want nothing from you, Mrs. Croft," Carter said smoothly. "We want to give you something. A weapon, a shield, a home." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "My client is in the process of acquiring the entire 157 tower, and they would like to gift you the Penthouse, your former home, along with a controlling interest in the building's ownership." Anya dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the man's voice still faintly audible. She stared at the cracked screen, her heart pounding in her chest. It was impossible. A prank, a cruel, elaborate hoax designed to break her spirit completely. But as she stood there in her small, anonymous apartment, a tiny, insane flicker of hope ignited within her. What if it wasn't a hoax? What if there was someone out there, a secret benefactor, a guardian angel with an appetite for vengeance and a flair for the dramatic? The idea was so outlandish, so utterly unbelievable, that it was almost perfect. A twist of fate so audacious that not even Julian Croft, in all his calculating arrogance, could have ever seen it coming. The battle for her future, she realized, had just begun, and a mysterious, powerful new player had just entered the game. The days that followed the mysterious phone call from Benjamin Carter were a strange mix of hope and disbelief. Anya half expected to wake up and find it was all a dream, a figment of her overwrought imagination. But then a sleek black car would appear at her doorstep, a courier would deliver a discreet package, or a quiet, unassuming email would land in her inbox. The secret benefactor, whoever they were, was very real, and their influence was both subtle and profound. The first tangible proof came in the form of a new secure phone delivered by a tight-lipped courier. It came with a single pre-programmed number, Benjamin Carter's. He became her sole point of contact with this invisible force, a calm, reassuring voice in the whirlwind of her life. "My client believes in discretion and security," Carter explained during their first call on the new device. "Julian Croft is a man who deals in information. We must ensure he has none about our activities." Carter also arranged for Anya to move. The small apartment, while a refuge, was not secure. The benefactor had acquired a spacious, elegant brownstone in a historic, tree-lined neighborhood in Brooklyn, a world away from the cold, modern glass of Midtown Manhattan. The property was registered to a shell corporation, making it untraceable to Julian. "Consider it your safe house," Carter told her, "a place to rest, to plan, and to prepare." Prepare for what Anya wondered. The benefactor's plans remained shrouded in mystery. All Carter would say was that his client had a long-term strategy to address the imbalance of power between Anya and Julian. The benefactor's most significant move, however, was in the legal arena. Carter introduced Anya via video conference to a new legal team. This wasn't a small one-woman operation like Helen's. This was a team of legal titans, the kind of lawyers who made men like Arthur Vance tremble. They were sharp, ruthless, and most importantly, they were now hers. "We've reviewed the documents Julian's lawyers sent you," said the lead attorney, a formidable woman named Evelyn Reed. "The NDA is a joke. We'll have it thrown out. The divorce proceedings will be handled on our terms, not his." But it was their strategy regarding the penthouse that truly stunned Anya. "The offer from my client stands," Carter confirmed. "They are in the final stages of a leveraged buyout of the entire portfolio of properties that includes 157. It's a complex off-market transaction that has been in the works for some time. Your, situation has simply accelerated the timeline." "Why?" Anya asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why are they doing this for me? I don't even know who they are." "My client," Carter said, his voice carefully neutral, "has a deep-seated belief in justice, and they have a personal interest in seeing Julian Croft held accountable for his actions. Let's just say your husband has made some powerful enemies." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. To be the beneficiary of such a powerful personal vendetta was a heavy burden, but it was also a shield, a weapon of unimaginable power. While Anya was being ensconced in her new life, Julian was growing increasingly agitated. His perfectly calibrated world was beginning to tilt on its axis. He had expected Anya to be broken, to be desperate. He had expected her to take the money sign, the papers, and disappear. But she hadn't. Instead, a wall of silence had gone up. The process server he had sent to her last known address, the dingy hotel, had been told she had checked out with no forwarding address. His private investigators, the best in the business, had hit a brick wall. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Then came the letter from Evelyn Reed's office. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression, a polite but firm declaration of war. It rejected his proposed settlement, informed him that Anya would be contesting the divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty, and most audaciously stated that she intended to seek full ownership of the marital home, the 157 Penthouse. Julian had laughed when he read that part. It was absurd, a desperate, amateurish bluff. But Arthur Vance, his own lawyer, had not been so dismissive. "Evelyn Reed is not an amateur, Julian." Vance had warned, his face pale. "She's a killer. If she's representing your wife, it means someone with very deep pockets is backing her. Someone who wants to hurt you." The news of the leveraged buyout of the 157's parent company sent a shockwave through the real estate world, and a jolt of pure dread through Julian. It was a bold, aggressive move, executed with a speed and precision that spoke of immense financial power. And it was aimed directly at him. He was about to lose control of his own building, his own kingdom. He became obsessed, consumed with finding out who was behind it. He called in favors, leveraged his contacts, but the identity of the buyer was shrouded in a complex web of offshore corporations and impenetrable trusts. It was a ghost, a phantom entity that was systematically dismantling his world. His paranoia began to seep into his professional life. He became short-tempered with his staff, suspicious of his partners. The amicable separation narrative he had so carefully constructed was beginning to crumble. Whispers began to circulate. Why was Julian Croft, the master of the universe, suddenly so embattled? What had really happened with his wife, Marcus? His brother watched Julian's unraveling with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "You should have just been a decent human being, Julian," he said one evening, finding his brother staring moodily out of the penthouse window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You made this bed for yourself. Someone is helping her." Julian snarled, his reflection a distorted mask of fury in the darkened glass. "Someone is pulling the strings, and I'm going to find out who it is." Meanwhile, in the quiet sanctuary of her Brooklyn brownstone, Anya was undergoing a transformation. With the immediate threat of homelessness and poverty removed, she began to heal. The constant fear and anxiety that had plagued her began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. She started painting again. The Benefactor, through Carter, had arranged for a state-of-the-art studio to be set up in the brownstone, complete with the finest canvases, paints, and brushes. For the first time in years, she felt the familiar, intoxicating rush of creative energy. Her art, once a source of quiet rebellion, was now becoming a declaration of strength. Her paintings were no longer the soft, abstract landscapes of her past. They were bold, raw, and full of emotion. She painted the gilded cage of the penthouse, the cold, unforgiving face of her husband, the terror of that first night alone. But she also painted the burgeoning life within her, the unexpected kindness of strangers, the nascent hope for a future she could call her own. She also began to educate herself. The legal team provided her with files, documents, and reports. She learned about Julian's business dealings, his vulnerabilities, the hidden cracks in his empire. She discovered that his success was built on a foundation of ruthless takeovers, broken promises, and ruined lives. He had left a trail of enemies in his wake, any one of whom could be her secret benefactor. The pregnancy was progressing, and with each passing week, her connection to the child grew stronger. This baby, once the source of her downfall, was now her greatest motivation. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her child's future, for their right to a life free from the shadow of their father. One day, Benjamin Carter arrived at the brownstone in person. It was the first time Anya had met him face to face. He was exactly as his voice had suggested, calm, impeccably dressed, and exuding an air of quiet competence. "My client felt it was time for you to have a more active role in the proceedings," he said, handing her a thick file. This is a comprehensive portfolio of Julian Croft's assets, his liabilities, and his indiscretions. Anya opened the file. It contained a wealth of information, hidden bank accounts, shell corporations, details of secret deals that bordered on illegal. But it was a smaller, separate envelope within the file that caught her attention. "What's this?" she asked. That Carter said, his expression unreadable, is what my client refers to as the key. It's personal. It's a piece of your husband's past that he has gone to great lengths to conceal. My client believes it is the one thing he fears above all else. Anya's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a faded photograph and a yellowed newspaper clipping. The photograph was of a young, smiling woman, her eyes full of life and hope. The newspaper clipping was an obituary. The woman's name was Sophia, and she had died tragically and mysteriously over a decade ago. "Who is she?" Anya whispered, a cold dread creeping into her heart. She was Julian Croft's first love. Carter explained, his voice soft. And her family believes he was responsible for her death. The room fell silent, the only sound the frantic beating of Anya's own heart. The Benefactor's game was far more dangerous, far more personal than she had ever imagined. This wasn't just about a divorce or a penthouse. It was about a secret that had the power to not just ruin Julian Croft, but to destroy him completely. And the Benefactor had just handed her the weapon. The revelation of Sophia's existence and the dark cloud of suspicion surrounding her death shifted the very ground beneath Anya's feet. The battle was no longer just about her own liberation. It was about uncovering a truth that had been buried for over a decade. The faded photograph of the smiling young woman became a haunting presence in the quiet brownstone, a silent testament to another life Julian had allegedly destroyed. Benjamin Carter, acting on his client's instructions, provided Anya with a more detailed dossier on the Sophia case. Sophia Romano had been Julian's college sweetheart, a brilliant, passionate young woman from a wealthy old-money family. They were the golden couple, destined for a life of shared success and happiness. But their relationship had ended abruptly, and shortly thereafter, Sophia had died in a single car accident on a winding coastal road. The official ruling was accidental death, but the Romano family had always suspected foul play. They believed Julian had driven her to her death either through emotional torment or as the darkest whispers, suggested by more direct means. The Romanos, a proud and powerful family in their own right, had tried to investigate, but Julian even then had been adept at covering his tracks. They had no concrete proof, only a deep-seated conviction that he was responsible. They had eventually withdrawn from society, broken by their grief and their inability to find justice for their daughter. "Why are you telling me this?" Anya asked Carter, her voice trembling. "Who is your client? Is it the Romano family?" Carter's expression remained impassive. "My client's identity must remain confidential for now, but I can tell you that they were very close to Sophia. Her death was a profound loss." The pieces began to click into place. The Benefactor's vendetta wasn't just about business or a general sense of justice. It was deeply, irrevocably personal. They were using Anya and her own struggle against Julian as the instrument of a long-delayed revenge. Anya felt a chill run down her spine. She was a pawn in a much larger, much deadlier game than she had realized. But she was also the one holding the most powerful piece on the board. Her legal team, led by Evelyn Reed, began to subtly shift their strategy. They weren't just attacking Julian's finances anymore. They were creating a narrative, a pattern of behavior. They started deposing former employees, ex-girlfriends. Anyone who had witnessed Julian's controlling nature, his ruthlessness, his capacity for cruelty. They were painting a portrait of a man who systematically broke the women in his life. The pressure on Julian was mounting from all sides. The phantom buyer had successfully completed the acquisition of 157. He was now a tenant in his own kingdom, a fact that galled him to his core. His business deals were facing unexpected scrutiny, with regulators suddenly taking a keen interest in transactions that had previously gone unnoticed, and the whispers about his amicable divorce were growing louder, fueled by strategic leaks from Anya's legal team. He was bleeding money influence, and most importantly, control. The world he had built with such meticulous precision was beginning to fracture. He became a man besieged, lashing out at everyone around him. His rages became legendary, his paranoia all-consuming. Marcus, his brother, was one of the few people who dared to confront him directly. "This is about more than the divorce, isn't it?" Marcus asked one night, finding Julian in his office, surrounded by financial reports and legal documents. "This feels different. It feels personal." Julian's head snapped up, his eyes bloodshot and wild. "What do you know about it?" he snarled. "I know that you're self-destructing," Marcus said, his voice unusually firm. "And I think I know why. I remember Sophia Julian. I remember what happened. And I think someone else does, too." The mention of Sophia's name was like a physical blow. Julian recoiled, his face ashen. "You will not speak that name in this office," he hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Why?" Marcus pressed, emboldened by his brother's reaction. "Because you're guilty. Because you know you destroyed her, just like you tried to destroy Anya." In a sudden, violent outburst, Julian swept everything off his desk. Papers, a laptop, a crystal decanter, all went crashing to the floor. "Get out!" he roared, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. "Get out of my life!" Marcus left shaken, but more certain than ever that the key to his brother's downfall lay in the past. While Julian was spiraling, Anya was finding her strength. The pregnancy was now visible, a gentle curve that she touched with a mixture of love and fierce protectiveness. She had chosen a name for her unborn child, a son whom she would call Leo. It meant lion, a symbol of the courage she was trying to embody. She continued to paint her work, becoming a visual diary of her journey. One of her paintings, a powerful abstract piece that captured the feeling of falling from a great height, was anonymously submitted to a prestigious art competition by the Benefactor. It won. The news, when it was announced, caused a small stir in the art world. A new unknown artist of incredible talent had emerged. For Anya, it was a validation of the identity she had sacrificed for her marriage, a sign that she was becoming her own person again. But the real turning point came when the Benefactor decided it was time to reveal their identity. Benjamin Carter arranged a meeting at a discreet, private location, a secluded wing of the Frick Collection, the renowned art museum after hours. Anya was led through the silent, echoing halls past masterpieces by Rembrandt and Vermeer to a small, quiet gallery. A woman was standing with her back to Anya, gazing at a painting. She was older, in her late 60s, with an air of quiet, unshakable elegance. She was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored suit, her silver hair styled in a chic, classic bob. When she turned around, her eyes a startlingly intelligent shade of blue met Anya's. "Anya?" the woman said, her voice warm, but tinged with a deep, abiding sadness. "I am so glad to finally meet you in person. My name is Isabella Romano." Anya's breath caught in her throat. It was Sophia's mother. "You are my benefactor." Anya whispered the words, a statement, not a question. "I am," Isabella confirmed. "Sophia was my only child. When she died, a part of me died with her. For years, my husband and I were lost in our grief. We had the wealth, the influence to fight Julian, but we lacked the will. We gave up." She gestured to the painting she had been looking at. "But I never forgot, and I never stopped watching him. I watched him build his emir on the ashes of other people's lives. I watched him charm his way through society, a wolf in sheep's clothing. And then I watched him marry you." Her gaze on Anya was intense, but not unkind. "I saw in you the same spark I saw in my Sophia. The same intelligence, the same passion, the same light, and I saw him trying to extinguish it just as he had extinguished hers. When he threw you out pregnant and alone, I knew I could not stand by any longer. It was as if he was killing my daughter all over again." Tears welled in Anya's eyes. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Sophia's death will never be avenged in a court of law," Isabella said, her voice hardening. "Julian was too clever for that. But he can be brought down. His empire is a house of cards built on arrogance and intimidation. And you, Anya, are the one who is going to pull out the first card." "Me?" Anya asked, bewildered. "How?" "Julian's greatest vulnerability," Isabella explained, "is his ego, his belief in his own invincibility. We have systematically dismantled his financial security and his public image. Now we must deliver the final personal blow. We must confront him with the two things he thought he had successfully buried: his past and his own child." The plan she outlined was audacious, a piece of high-stakes theater designed to shatter Julian's psyche completely. "The annual Croft Foundation Charity Gala is in 2 weeks, Isabella said. "It is Julian's crowning achievement, the one night of the year he gets to play the benevolent philanthropist. It is the perfect stage for his public humiliation." The plan was simple, yet devastating. Anya would make her return to society at the gala. She would not be the broken, discarded wife. She would be the picture of strength, success, and radiant motherhood. And she would be escorted by a guest who would be sure to capture the attention of every camera and every gossip columnist in the room. "Who will I be with?" Anya asked. Isabella smiled, a flicker of grim satisfaction in her eyes. "With my husband," she said. "The world has not seen Alessandro Romano in public in over a decade. His presence at your side will be a declaration of war that every person in that room will understand." And there was one more piece to the plan, one final devastating twist. "We have also acquired something else of Julian's," Isabella said, her voice dropping. "A small private biotech company he invested in years ago, one he has kept off the books. It specializes in genetic research and paternity testing." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "We have arranged for a court order demanding a paternity test for your unborn child. The results will be delivered by legal courier to Julian on the night of the gala." Anya's mind reeled. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. To confront him with his past, his present, and his future all at once in the most public of settings. "He will be cornered," Isabella said, her voice as cold as steel. "He will be exposed, and he will have nowhere left to run." As Anya left the museum, the weight of what she was about to do settled upon her. She was no longer just a victim seeking justice. She was an avenger, a key player in a decade-old tragedy. She thought of Sophia, the vibrant young woman in the photograph, and of Leo, the lion-hearted son growing within her. She was fighting for both of them now. The final act was about to begin, and the stage was set for a confrontation that would bring the House of Croft crashing down once and for all. The night of the Croft Foundation Charity Gala was Julian's annual coronation, a glittering spectacle held in the grand ballroom of the New York Public Library. He stood at its center, playing the part of the benevolent king. But beneath the bespoke tuxedo, he was a man on the verge of collapse. The world he had built with brutal precision was fracturing, attacked by a phantom enemy who seemed to anticipate his every move. His unraveling had accelerated that morning. A court order for a paternity test had been served, a legal dagger aimed at the heart of his deepest, most guarded secret. A rare genetic disorder that ran in his family, a condition he knew he was a carrier for. The child he had rejected wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a potential time bomb that could expose the one vulnerability he lived in mortal fear of. A sudden collective gasp silenced the ballroom's cheerful hum. The crowd, a sea of couture and diamonds, turned as one towards the grand staircase. Julian's blood ran cold. It was Anya. She stood at the top of the stairs, not as a victim, but as a vision of breathtaking power. She was radiant in an emerald green gown that proudly displayed her pregnancy, her eyes locking with his across the room, holding not fear, but a cold, unwavering resolve. The man at her side, however, was the true masterstroke. It was Alessandro Romano Sofia's father, a ghost from Julian's past, resurrected to witness his downfall. His presence with Anya was a public declaration of war, and every person in that room understood its devastating implication. As they descended, the elite crowd parted for them, camera flashes erupting like gunfire. This was the image that would seal Julian's fate, the exiled pregnant wife returning on the arm of her husband's oldest and most bitter enemy. Anya approached him, her expression serene, while Alessandro stood back, a silent, powerful sentinel. "Julian," she said, her voice clear and carrying, "you're looking unwell." "What is this?" he hissed, his voice a desperate, strangled whisper. "Mr. Romano and his wife have shown me the kindness I never received from my husband," she replied, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear their ears straining for every word. At that moment, a legal courier appeared, cutting through the stunned onlookers. He held out a sealed envelope. "Mr. Croft," he announced, "the results of the court-ordered paternity test." The room held its breath. Julian stared at the envelope, a death warrant for the secrets he'd killed to protect. He knew it would confirm the child was his, giving Anya's lawyers the power to subpoena his medical records and expose everything. "Go on, Julian," Anya urged softly. "Open it. The world is waiting." He couldn't move. He was trapped in the Klieg lights of his own, making a king, cornered in his crumbling castle. Then Anya delivered the final fatal blow, leaning in so only he could hear. "It doesn't matter what that paper says. The world will soon know the truth about everything, about Sophia, about how you really built this empire." She smiled, a chillingly beautiful gesture. "By the way, Isabella Romano bought this library. She's donating it to the city in her daughter's name. Your foundation, your legacy. It will all be erased." That was the blow that shattered him. The intricate facade of Julian Croft, titan and philanthropist, disintegrated. He looked at Anya, the woman he had discarded, and saw the architect of his ruin. With a strangled cry of utter despair, he turned and fled. Pushing through the shocked crowd, running from the cameras, from his past, and from the inescapable truth of his own monstrosity. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The story of his public meltdown exploded, and his empire, built on a foundation of intimidation, crumbled to dust. His stock plummeted. Partners vanished, and Julian Croft, the man who had everything, simply disappeared. The penthouse at 157 was officially signed over to Anya. It was no longer a gilded cage, but a true home. She gave birth to a healthy son, Leo, who, in a final act of cosmic irony, had not inherited the dreaded genetic disorder. Standing in her sunlit living room, holding her son Anya, looked out at the city. She had been cast down from this tower, only to end up owning it. Her power wasn't in the building or the money, but in the strength she had found within herself. Aided by a mother's grief, she had faced a monster, and won. She was free, and the future, like the view before her, was limitless. So what do you think of Anya's incredible story? A journey from a shattered life on the cold pavement to owning the very tower she was cast out from. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the money you have, but the resilience you find in your darkest moments. And sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. What if the most beautiful day of your life was used as a weapon to destroy you? Imagine a grand ballroom filled with 100 of the city's elite, all eyes on one man, a charismatic millionaire on the verge of a life-changing announcement. But this isn't a celebration of his success. It's the stage for a shocking betrayal. He's about to propose to his mistress in front of everyone. But he's forgotten one crucial detail. His pregnant wife is in the audience, and she's holding a secret that will turn his triumphant moment into a public spectacle of ruin. Stay with us as we unravel a story of love lies and a revenge so perfectly orchestrated it will leave you breathless. The lie was a gilded car, and Julian Thorne was both its prisoner and its architect. To the world, he was the golden boy of the tech industry, the visionary CEO of Nexus Innovations, a company that had revolutionized the way people connected. His life was a curated masterpiece of success, a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, a collection of vintage cars that would make any collector weep, and a wife who was the epitome of grace and beauty, Amelia. Amelia Thorne was more than just a pretty face on Julian's arm. She was an accomplished art curator, her gallery a sanctuary of emerging talent in a city obsessed with the established. Her intelligence was as sharp as her wit, her heart as expansive as the canvases she so adored. She was the calm to his storm, the anchor to his soaring ambition. And she was pregnant with their first child, a secret they had been cherishing, a new chapter they were about to write together in the beautiful story of their lives. Or so she thought. In the weeks leading up to the Nexus Innovations' 10th anniversary gala, Julian had been a different man. He was more attentive, more affectionate than he had been in months. He would come home early, bearing bouquets of Amelia's favorite peonies, his eyes filled with a tenderness that melted away the subtle anxieties that had begun to creep into her heart. He'd talk about the baby, his voice thick with emotion, his hand resting on her burgeoning belly, as if to protect their unborn child from the world. Amelia, ever the optimist, had allowed herself to believe that this was a new beginning, that the distance she had felt growing between them was just a product of his work stress. She had no idea that his renewed affection was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade, a final act of deception before the curtain fell on their marriage. The truth was, Julian was leading a double life, a life that revolved around Isabella Rossi. Isabella was a force of nature, a fiery Italian beauty with ambition that burned as brightly as her emerald eyes. A rising star in the world of fashion, blogging her social media, was a carefully curated fantasy of glamour and luxury, a life she was determined to make her own. She had met Julian at a tech conference a year ago, and their connection had been instant electric and utterly forbidden. To Isabella, Julian was not just a married man. He was a stepping stone, a golden ticket to the life she so desperately craved. She had convinced herself that their love was real, a passionate affair that eclipsed the staid, comfortable marriage he had with Amelia. She saw Amelia as a relic of Julian's past, a woman who couldn't possibly understand the depths of his ambition, the fire in his soul. Isabella was the future, and she was tired of waiting in the wings. The plan had been hatched in the hushed intimacy of a 5-star hotel suite, a place that had become their sanctuary. It was Isabella's idea, a bold, audacious move that would leave no room for retreat. "You need to choose Julian," she had whispered, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You can't have both. It's time to show the world who you really love. Propose to me at the gala, in front of everyone. Let them see that I am the one you choose." Julian, a man who had built an empire on calculated risks, was initially hesitant. The scandal would be enormous, the fallout unpredictable. But Isabella's words had tapped into a deep-seated insecurity. He harbored a fear of being ordinary. He had always been a man who took what he wanted, and he wanted Isabella. He wanted the thrill, the passion, the validation she offered. He had convinced himself that a clean break, however brutal, was the only way. He would be seen as a man of decisive action, a man who followed his heart no matter the cost. He would be free. So the stage was set for a public execution of his marriage. The Nexus Innovations 10th Anniversary Gala, to be held at the opulent Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, was the chosen venue. The guest list was a who's who of the global tech and finance industries. The media would be there in full force. It was the perfect platform for Julian to unveil his new life with Isabella by his side. A few days before the gala, Julian presented Amelia with a stunning diamond necklace. "A little something to celebrate us," he had said, his voice a smooth, practiced lie, "for being the most patient, loving wife a man could ask for, and for carrying our child." Amelia, her heart swelling with love, had thrown her arms around him, burying her face in his neck, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne. A scent she had always associated with home, with safety. She was completely oblivious to the fact that in a velvet box, tucked away in his safe, lay another diamond. A diamond of staggering size and brilliance, a diamond that would soon be placed on another woman's finger. The legendary Winston Blue Diamond, a gem as deep and blue as the ocean of lies he was about to drown her in. Amelia had her own surprise planned for the gala. She had spent weeks secretly compiling a video montage of their life together. It was a love letter in moving pictures, their first date, their trip to Tuscany, their wedding day. The highlight was a clip from their wedding vows. Julian's voice, thick with unshed tears, promising to love and cherish her for all eternity. She had intended to have it played as a surprise for him during her toast, a public declaration of her love and excitement for their growing family. She had no idea that her beautiful, heartfelt gift would become her weapon of choice in a war she didn't even know she was fighting. As Amelia packed for their trip to Singapore, she hummed a soft tune, her hand resting on her belly. She felt a flutter, a gentle kick from the new life growing inside her. She smiled. Everything was perfect. She was living in a gilded cage, but she was yet to see the bars. The door was about to be flung open, not to freedom, but to a devastating truth that would shatter her world into 1,000,000 pieces. The storm was gathering, and she was standing right in its eye, blissfully unaware of the destruction that was about to be unleashed. The grand ballroom of the Marina Bay Sands was a spectacle of breathtaking opulence. Crystal chandeliers like frozen waterfalls hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a galaxy of light upon the sea of guests below. The air hummed with the symphony of clinking champagne flutes, hushed conversations, and the gentle strains of a string quartet. The elite of the global tech world were all there, dressed in their finest, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of success. This was Julian Thorne's kingdom, and tonight he was its undisputed king. Amelia, radiant in a bespoke midnight blue gown that draped elegantly over her pregnant form, moved through the crowd with an easy grace. The diamond necklace Julian had given her sparkled at her throat, a cold, beautiful lie against her warm skin. She greeted friends and acquaintances, her smile genuine, her heart full of a quiet joy. She felt a surge of pride for Julian, for the empire he had built from the ground up. She was his partner in every sense of the word, his confidant, his biggest supporter. Tonight was a celebration of their shared journey, their shared success. Julian was in his element, a charismatic whirlwind of handshakes and charming smiles. He moved from one influential guest to another, his words as smooth as the vintage champagne he sipped. But beneath the polished veneer of the successful CEO, a current of nervous energy crackled. His eyes would occasionally flit towards the entrance, a flicker of anticipation, of dread in their depths. Amelia, ever attuned to his moods, noticed his restlessness. "Everything all right, my love?" she asked, her hand finding his. "You seem a little on edge." Julian turned to her, his smile a masterpiece of deception. "Just the usual pre-speech jitters," he lied, squeezing her hand. 10 years. It's a big milestone. I want everything to be perfect." He leaned in and kissed her, a brief, almost perfunctory gesture that felt more like a performance for the benefit of those watching than a genuine expression of affection. "You look breathtaking tonight, Amelia," he murmured, his eyes holding hers for a fraction of a second too long. A flicker of something unreadable in their depths. It could have been guilt, or perhaps a final fleeting moment of regret. Amelia, reassured, smiled back at him. "You'll be brilliant, as always." A short while later, Isabella Rossi made her entrance. She was a vision in crimson, a stark, dramatic contrast to the cool blues and silvers that dominated the ballroom. Her dress was a daring, figure-hugging creation that announced her arrival with an unapologetic confidence. Heads turned, whispers followed in her wake. She was a woman who commanded attention, and tonight she was determined to hold it. She caught Julian's eye from across the room, a slow, predatory smile gracing her lips. It was a look of shared conspiracy of imminent victory. Amelia, her back to the entrance, as she chatted with the wife of a Japanese investor, missed the silent exchange entirely. The moment came after the main course had been cleared. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight found Julian as he ascended the stage. A hush fell over the ballroom. He stood at the podium, the Nexus Innovations logo glowing on the massive screen behind him. He looked out at the sea of faces, a confident smile playing on his lips. He began his speech with a walk down memory lane, his voice resonant and captivating. He spoke of the early days of Nexus Innovations, the struggles, the breakthroughs, the relentless pursuit of a dream. He was a master storyteller, weaving a narrative of innovation and perseverance that had the audience hanging on his every word. He paid tribute to his team, his investors, his partners. It was a flawless performance, the speech of a visionary leader at the pinnacle of his success. Amelia watched him from her table at the front, her heart swelling with pride. She clutched the small USB drive in her purse, the wedding video she had so lovingly prepared. She couldn't wait to see the look on his face when she played it. Then Julian's tone shifted. Success, he said, his voice taking on a more personal, more intimate quality, is not just about building a company. It's about building a life. It's about finding that one person who understands you, who challenges you, who inspires you to be the best version of yourself. Amelia smiled, thinking he was about to pay tribute to her, to their marriage. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. For a long time, Julian continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, I thought I had that. I thought I knew what happiness was. But life has a funny way of surprising you. It throws you a curveball when you least expect it, and you realize that everything you thought you knew, everything you thought you wanted, was wrong. A ripple of confusion went through the audience. This was not the typical corporate speech. Amelia's smile faltered. A cold knot of dread began to form in the pit of her stomach. This was not the script she had imagined. Tonight, Julian declared, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction. I want to be honest. I want to be true to myself and to my heart. There is someone in this room who has changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Someone who has shown me what true passion, what true love really is. He paused, letting the suspense build. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, thick with a palpable tension. Amelia's heart was pounding in her chest, a frantic, desperate drumbeat against her ribs. She looked around, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. And then she saw her. Isabella Rossi standing near the stage, her eyes locked on Julian, her expression a mixture of triumph and anticipation. Isabella. Julian said, his voice soft, but carrying to every corner of the room. Isabella Rossi, would you please join me on stage? A collective gasp went through the crowd. Whispers erupted like wildfire. All eyes turned to Isabella as she glided towards the stage, her crimson dress a slash of defiance against the shocked silence. She took Julian's hand, her smile radiant, triumphant. Julian turned to face her, his back to the massive screen that still bore his company's logo. He ignored the shocked faces in the crowd, the frantic whispers, the dawning realization on the faces of those who knew he was a married man. He had eyes only for Isabella. Isabella, he began, his voice thick with a rehearsed emotion. You are the most incredible woman I have ever met. You are my soulmate, my everything. I know this is sudden, but I can't live another day without you by my side. I want the world to know how much I love you. And then in front of 100 horrified guests, in front of the world's media, Julian Thorne, the celebrated tech millionaire, got down on one knee. He pulled out a velvet box, and from it, he produced a ring that silenced the room. The Winston Blue Diamond. A magnificent pear-shaped gem of an impossible, mesmerizing blue caught the light and shattered it into 1,000 glittering shards. It was a king's ransom on a platinum band. Isabella Rossi. Julian's voice boomed through the speakers. Will you marry me? Time seemed to stop. For a moment, the only sound was the frantic clicking of cameras. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with feigned surprise. This was her moment, the culmination of all her plans, all her ambitions. But just as she opened her mouth to say yes, just as the word of her victory was about to be uttered, a flicker on the giant screen behind them stole the attention of every single person in the room. The Nexus Innovations logo dissolved, and in its place, a new image began to form. It was a scene of breathtaking beauty, a sun-drenched vineyard in Tuscany. And in the center of the frame, a younger, happier Julian Thorne looked into the eyes of his bride, Amelia. The wedding video began to play silent at first, a ghost of a memory flickering to life on the giant screen. The image was jarringly intimate in the vast, opulent ballroom. There was Julian, his face unguarded, his eyes shining with an adoration that was achingly real. He was looking at Amelia resplendent in a lace wedding gown, her smile a beacon of pure, unadulterated joy. The scene was from their wedding day 4 years prior, a day that now felt like a lifetime ago. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Julian, still on one knee, froze. He looked up at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Isabella, her triumphant smile faltering, followed his gaze. The blood drained from her face. This was not part of the plan. Then the audio kicked in. Julian's voice, younger, more earnest, filled the silent ballroom. It was his wedding speech, a torrent of heartfelt promises and poetic declarations of love. "They say that every man dreams of a moment like this," his voice echoed. "A moment where everything falls into place, where you look at someone and you just know. You know that you've found your other half. Looking at Amelia today, I know that for the first time in my life, I am whole." On screen, the younger Julian raised his glass to Amelia. "To my wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My beautiful, brilliant, incredible wife. You are my compass, my anchor, my one true north. You are not just the love of my life. You are my life. I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of your love. I promise to cherish you, to honor you, and to love you and only you for all of eternity." The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it was almost comical. The guests sat in stunned silence, their gazes shifting from the romantic spectacle on the screen to the sordid tableau on the stage. There was Julian kneeling before his mistress, the echoes of his eternal vows to his wife ringing in his ears. There was Isabella, her face a thunderous canvas of fury and humiliation. And there at her table near the front was Amelia. She rose to her feet, a vision of ethereal calm in the eye of the storm. The midnight blue of her gown seemed to absorb the chaos around her, her posture regale her expression, unreadable. She was no longer a victim. She was a queen about to reclaim her throne. Every eye in the room was now on her as she began to walk towards the stage. Her steps slow, deliberate, and utterly fearless. The gentle swell of her pregnancy was now unmistakable, a silent, powerful testament to the depth of Julian's betrayal. As she reached the stage, a technician acting on a prearranged signal handed her a microphone. She didn't look at Julian, not yet. She addressed the crowd, her voice as clear and as cold as ice. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady, devoid of any tremor. "I apologize for the interruption. My husband, as you can see, is a man of grand gestures. It seems he has so much love to give, he decided one wife simply wasn't enough." A wave of shocked laughter, quickly stifled, went through the room. Julian scrambled to his feet, his face ashen. "Amelia," he stammered, reaching for her. "What are you doing?" Amelia finally turned her gaze upon him, and for the first time that night, Julian saw his wife. Not the gentle, forgiving Amelia he had taken for granted, but a woman of formidable strength, her eyes blazing with a cold, righteous fury. "What am I doing?" She repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "I'm simply providing a little context, Julian. A little trip down memory lane. I thought your new fiancé," she spat the word like a curse, her eyes flicking to Isabella, "might appreciate knowing the kind of promises you're capable of making and breaking." She then turned her attention to Isabella, who stood frozen, the magnificent Winston blue diamond on her finger, now feeling like a shackle. "Isabella, isn't it?" Amelia said, her voice dripping with a polite, venomous sweetness. "That's a beautiful ring. The Winston blue. A truly remarkable diamond. Did he tell you its history? It's said to bring its wearer great fortune, but only if the love it represents is true. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive, very beautiful curse." Isabella, for the first time, found her voice. "You have no right," she began, her voice shrill with indignation. "No right." Amelia cut her off, taking a step closer. "I am his wife. I am the mother of his unborn child." She let that revelation hang in the air, a bombshell that sent another shockwave through the room. "I have every right. You, on the other hand, are a footnote in a story that is about to come to a very abrupt end." Amelia turned back to Julian, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Julian? Did you think I was that naive, that blind, while you were whispering sweet nothings in her ear? I was at home, feeling our baby kick for the first time. While you were buying her diamonds, I was decorating a nursery. You weren't just cheating on me, Julian. You were cheating on our family. You were cheating on the future you promised us." She paused, taking a deep breath, her composure absolute. "This grand romantic gesture," she said, gesturing to the pathetic scene on the stage. "It's not about love. It's about your ego, your insatiable need for more. More money, more success, more adoration. You didn't fall in love with her, Julian. You fell in love with a younger, more flattering reflection of yourself." Then she delivered the final devastating blow. "And you know what the saddest part is? You've not only destroyed our marriage, our family, you've just destroyed the very empire you're so proud of." Julian stared at her, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He thought this was just about his infidelity, a messy, public divorce. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. He had no idea that his wife, the quiet, unassuming art curator, was about to bring his entire world crashing down around him. He had underestimated her. And in the world of high-stakes business and brutal betrayals, underestimating your opponent was a fatal mistake. A cavernous silence descended upon the grand ballroom, a void so absolute it seemed to swallow the music, the whispers, and the very air itself. On the massive screen, the image of a beaming Amelia in her wedding dress faded, replaced by the stark, glowing logo of Nexus Innovations, a silent monument to the lie that had just been exposed. Julian remained on one knee, frozen in a grotesque parody of a romantic proposal. The Winston blue diamond on Isabella's finger, which moments ago had been a symbol of triumphant new love, now felt like a shard of ice, a cold, heavy weight of impending doom. Julian's mind, usually a fortress of strategic calculation, was a maelstrom of chaos. This can't be happening. The thought ricocheted through his skull. It's a prank, a sick, twisted joke. He scrambled to his feet, a jerky, uncoordinated movement that betrayed his panic. He forced a laugh, a harsh, grating sound that echoed unnaturally in the stillness. "Well," he said, his voice straining for a lightness it could not find. "It seems my wife has a flair for the dramatic. A little trip down memory lane, it seems. Very sentimental." He turned to the audience, his smile a desperate cracking veneer. "But as I was saying, tonight is about the future." His words trailed off into nothingness. No one was listening. Every single eye in that room, from the powerful venture capitalists at the front tables to the service staff lingering by the walls, was fixed on the woman walking toward the stage. Amelia moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a tidal wave, gathering its strength before it crashes ashore. She was no longer the heartbroken wife. She was an avenging angel, her face a mask of serene, chilling composure. The microphone was in her hand, and as she stepped into the spotlight, she seemed to draw all the light in the room, leaving Julian and Isabella in a sudden, cold shadow. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice, amplified by the speakers, was calm and clear, yet it cut through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "I do apologize for the interruption. My husband, Julian Thorne, as you can see, is a man of grand gestures. It seems he has so much love to give." She paused, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. He decided one wife simply wasn't enough. A few shocked gasps, followed by a ripple of nervous, incredulous laughter, broke the tension. Julian's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. This was not a sentimental prank. This was a declaration of war. "Amelia, stop this," he hissed, taking a step towards her. "You're making a scene. We can discuss this at home." "Home?" Amelia's laugh was a soft, brittle sound, devoid of all warmth. "You mean the house I built? The bed we shared, the nursery I decorated for our child?" "Which home are you referring to, Julian? Because it seems to me you've made your new home in hotel suites and whispered lies." She turned her gaze on Isabella, who stood frozen, her mind racing. "This is a disaster." He promised he had handled her. He promised she was weak. Isabella's instinct was to fight back, to assert her claim. "You have no right to be up here," she snapped, her voice higher and shriller than she intended. "This is our moment." "Your moment." Amelia's eyes, cold and assessing, raked over Isabella from head to toe. "Your moment of what, exactly? Of triumph, of stealing another woman's husband? Let me tell you what this moment is. It's a lesson in the true cost of things." She gestured to the magnificent diamond on Isabella's hand. "That is the Winston Blue. A truly remarkable diamond. Did he tell you its history? It's said to bring its wearer great fortune, but only if the love it represents is true. Otherwise, it's just a very expensive, very beautiful curse. And darling." Amelia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was nonetheless audible to the front rows. "Looking at you now, I'd say you're thoroughly cursed." Then she turned from the personal to the professional, her focus shifting to the audience, specifically to the tables where the most powerful investors were seated. Her entire demeanor changed. The wronged wife receded, and a formidable new persona emerged, the savvy, aggrieved business partner. "Many of you in this room are investors in Nexus Innovations," she began, her tone now crisp and authoritative. "You invested your capital and your trust in a company you believed to be stable, led by a man you believed to be a visionary. But I ask you, how can you trust a man with your millions when he cannot even honor the most sacred personal contract of his life? This struck a chord. Phones previously held up to record the drama were now being used for a different purpose. Thumbs flew across screens as investors sent frantic coded messages to their teams. The narrative had shifted from a salacious affair to a question of leadership, of stability, of risk. Julian likes to tell the story. Amelia continued, pacing the stage slowly, of how he started Nexus Innovations in a dusty garage with nothing but a dream and a few $1,000s of his own money. It's a fantastic story. It's the myth of the self-made man, the narrative upon which his entire public persona is built. It's a powerful story. She stopped and looked directly at Julian. And it is a complete and utter lie. Julian's blood ran cold. No, she wouldn't. He had buried that truth so deep, had rewritten history so effectively, that even he barely remembered it. The truth, Amelia announced, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell, is that Nexus Innovations was born not in a garage, but in a lawyer's office. It was funded not by a few $1,000s, but by $50 million of seed capital. Money that did not come from a venture capitalist or a bank loan that recognized Julian's supposed genius. It came from a single source, my family's trust. The ballroom erupted. The low murmur exploded into a roar of conversation. Julian felt the floor tilt beneath his feet. This was a catastrophic blow, striking at the very heart of his carefully constructed legacy. He was not the self-made titan he claimed to be. He was a man who had been bankrolled by his wife's family. And my grandfather, Amelia's voice sliced through the noise, silencing the room once more, was a man who had seen his share of charlatans and opportunists. He believed in Julian's idea, but he was a shrewd judge of character. He saw the ambition, but he also saw the recklessness. So he insisted on a small, simple clause in the investment agreement. A safeguard. He called it his integrity clause. A morality clause. Julian stared at her, his mind a blank wall of white noise. Morality clause. The words barely registered. It was a faint, dusty memory, a piece of legal jargon he had dismissed as the ramblings of an old man, irrelevant in the face of his inevitable success. The clause is very specific, Amelia explained, as if lecturing a class. It states that in the event of a gross breach of personal and professional trust, an act of such profound betrayal and public infidelity that it brings shame upon our family name and by extension jeopardizes the ethical standing of the company, his money founded the controlling interest in the shares, purchased with that $50 million, automatically reverts to me. If the previous revelation had been a bombshell, this was a nuclear detonation. The implications were staggering. At the company's current valuation, that initial investment now represented a 40% stake in Nexus Innovations, not a minority share, a controlling interest. "You're lying!" Julian finally found his voice, a desperate, strangled cry. "That's not legal. It wouldn't hold up." "Oh, it's perfectly legal, Mr. Thorne, and it will hold up in any court in the world." The new voice was deep resonant and commanded immediate respect. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as a distinguished silver-haired man in an impeccably tailored suit made his way to the stage. It was Mr. David Chen, a titan of Asian finance, a man whose reputation for integrity was as legendary as his fortune. He was, as Julian knew, with a sinking feeling of absolute dread, the executor of Amelia's family estate. Mr. Chen ascended the stage and stood beside Amelia, placing a protective paternal hand on her shoulder. He looked at Julian, not with anger, but with a profound and heavy disappointment. I was your father-in-law's closest friend and his personal attorney for 30 years. Mr. Chen said, his voice a low rumble of authority. I personally drafted that clause. I advised him that while Julian was brilliant, his character was a high-risk investment. The clause was non-negotiable. He turned to the audience. And as the executor of the estate, I have already filed the necessary paperwork with our legal teams. As of this moment, Miss Amelia Thorne is the majority shareholder and the controlling power of Nexus Innovations. The House of Cards did not just collapse. It was annihilated. Julian stumbled backwards, his hand clutching his chest as if he'd been physically shot. He had lost his company. In the span of 10 minutes on the night that was meant to be his crowning glory, he had lost everything. He spun around his mind, searching for a target, for someone to blame other than himself. His wild eyes landed on Isabella. She was trying to back away, to melt into the shadows, her face a mask of pure terror. Her own scheme was unraveling her dreams of wealth and power, turning to ash. "Not so fast, Ms. Rossi." Mr. Chen's voice was like a whip crack. He held up a tablet, its screen glowing. It seems Mr. Thorne's catastrophic lack of judgment was not limited to his marriage. He addressed Julian directly. For the past 6 months, Nexus has been bleeding sensitive data, product roadmaps, R&D on our next-gen processors, confidential financial projections. We knew we had a mole, but we couldn't find the source. We suspected a high-level breach. He paused. We were wrong. The breach wasn't high-level. It was intimate. He turned the tablet to face Julian. On the screen was a decrypted communication log, a series of damning emails and texts between the account Bella Rossi and a senior executive at Aperture Dynamics Nexus Innovations' most ruthless competitor. It was a meticulous record of corporate espionage. Isabella had been seducing him for secrets, playing the part of the love-struck mistress while systematically gutting his company from the inside. Julian stared at the screen, then at Isabella. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it was almost surreal. He had been a pawn in 2 different games and had lost them both. All the humiliation, all the rage, all the terror he felt coalesced into a single explosive point. "You!" he snarled, lunging towards her. "You did this!" 2 large security guards materializing as if from nowhere at Mr. Chen's subtle signal intercepted him, holding him back. Isabella shrieked, cowering away from him. "I did what you wanted!" she screamed back, her facade of sophistication shattering completely. "You wanted to be free. You wanted to be with me. I wanted a partner, not a viper who would sell me out to the highest bidder." Julian roared, struggling against the guard's iron grip. The scene had descended into sheer pandemonium. Paparazzi who had been held at the perimeter broke through the lines, their flashes exploding like a volley of gunfire. In the midst of the chaos, one of Mr. Chen's assistants, a stern-faced woman, walked calmly up to the sobbing Isabella. "I believe this belongs to Mr. Chen's client," she said coolly, and with practiced efficiency, she slid the Winston blue diamond from Isabella's finger. The cursed diamond was dropped unceremoniously into a simple evidence bag. That final act seemed to break something in Julian. The fight went out of him. His body went limp, and he sagged against the guards holding him up. His gaze was vacant, his face a hollow mask of utter devastation. He looked out at the sea of faces. Faces of former friends, colleagues, and investors, and saw nothing but contempt, pity, and the morbid fascination of strangers watching a spectacular car crash. He was no longer Julian Thorne, the tech visionary. He was a joke, a failure, a man who had built a glittering empire on a foundation of lies, only to see it all brought down by the two women he thought he could control. As the flashbulbs continued to pop, searing the image of his ruin onto the world's collective memory, he finally understood. This wasn't just the end of his career. It was the end of his life as he knew it. He stood on the brightly lit stage of his own, making a fallen king in a kingdom of rubble. Of course, here is a rewritten, significantly longer and more detailed version of Part 5, delving deeper into the aftermath and the characters' new realities. The sun that rose over Singapore the next morning seemed to Julian like a hostile, interrogating eye. He was huddled in the cavernous living room of his penthouse suite, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of a world that no longer felt like his. The silence of the suite was a physical presence, a heavy blanket smothering him, punctuated only by the incessant, angry buzzing of his phone on the marble coffee table. He hadn't slept. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flash of cameras. The cold disappointment in Mr. Chen's eyes, the triumphant, chilling calm on Amelia's face. His world had been reduced to the glowing screen of a tablet in his trembling hands. The headlines screamed at him from every major news outlet on the planet. The Thorne Betrayal, CEO loses billion-dollar empire in shocking gala proposal. Nexus in freefall. Wife seizes control after morality clause triggered the CEO and the spy. How a scorned wife uncovered a multi-billion-dollar espionage plot. Social media was a raging inferno. The hashtag #GeilerOffLies was trending globally. Memes of his devastated face were already viral. He was no longer a person. He was a spectacle, a cautionary tale for the ages his downfall consumed as entertainment by millions. He finally picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Amelia's name. He had called 37 times. He had sent 22 rambling, incoherent texts, a digital tapestry of apologies, accusations, and desperate pleas, all unanswered. The silence from her was more damning than any angry reply could ever be. Miles away in a serene, minimalist suite overlooking the gardens by the bay, Amelia was the picture of tranquility. She sat opposite Mr. Chen at a large mahogany table, sipping chamomile tea. Her phone was off. Spread before them were not tabloids, but corporate financial statements, legal documents, and a draft of a press release. There was no celebration, no gloating. There was only work to be done. The board is convening an emergency session via video conference at 0900. Mr. Chen said, his voice calm and steady. The motion to remove Julian as CEO and chairman is a formality at this point. They're terrified. The stock is projected to lose 60% of its value at opening bell. We need to halt trading, Amelia said, her voice clear and decisive. She had already shed the skin of the artist and donned the armor of a leader. We can't let panic dictate our value. We need to issue a statement immediately, one that reassures our employees and our real investors that Nexus is not Julian Thorne. It's bigger than him. Its future is secure. And what is that future, Amelia? Mr. Chen asked, watching her carefully. Amelia looked out the window, her hand resting protectively on her belly. My grandfather invested in an idea, David, an idea about connecting people. Julian turned that into a machine for accumulating wealth and power. He became obsessed with growth, with winning, and he lost sight of the why. The future of Nexus is in rediscovering that why. technology with a conscience, innovation with integrity. That will be our story." Mr. Chen smiled a rare, genuine expression of pride. The old man would have been so proud of his granddaughter. She had not only inherited his fortune, she had inherited his wisdom. The weeks that followed were a brutal lesson in consequence for Julian. The emergency board meeting was a swift, bloodless execution. He appeared via a video link, a disheveled, hollowed-out version of himself, and listened in sullency as the people who had once hung on his every word voted unanimously to sever all ties with him. He was stripped of his titles, his stock options, his severance package. The company he had considered an extension of himself had surgically amputated him. His financial ruin was just as swift. Lawsuits from shareholders piled up, and his personal assets were frozen pending the litigation. The sprawling penthouse, the collection of vintage cars, the private jet, they were all just assets to be liquidated bargaining chips in a game he had already lost. Friends who had once clamored for his attention now crossed the street to avoid him. He was radioactive. Isabella Rossi's downfall was even more public and pathetic. The images of her being led from her chic apartment in handcuffs, her face streaked with tears, were a stark counterpoint to the glamorous photos she had so carefully curated. Her bail was set at an impossibly high figure, and Aperture Dynamics, the company she had betrayed Nexus for, immediately disavowed any knowledge of her actions, leaving her to face the wolves alone. At her first hearing, her lawyer argued she was a pawn, a woman blinded by love. But the prosecution laid out the evidence of encrypted financial transactions and damning communications, painting a picture not of a lovelorn fool, but of a calculating and greedy operative. Her fantasy had ended in a beige-colored courtroom, her future to be decided by strangers. While their worlds imploded, Amelia's was expanding. She returned from Singapore and walked into the glass and steel headquarters of Nexus Innovations, not as the CEO's wife, but as its leader. A palpable tension hung in the air as she addressed the entire company in the main atrium. Employees who had known her only as a pretty face at holiday parties now looked at her with a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity. "I know there is a lot of uncertainty right now," she began, her voice steady and sure, needing no podium or notes. "You read the headlines, you saw the drama, and you are right to be concerned. But I am not here to talk about the past. I am here to talk about our future." She laid out her vision with a passion and clarity that captivated the room. She spoke not of market caps and quarterly earnings, but of purpose, of building products that helped people, of creating a workplace culture free from the toxic, high-pressure ego that had defined Julian's reign. "For too long," she concluded, "this company has been a reflection of one man's ambition. From today, it will be a reflection of our collective integrity." She didn't receive a standing ovation. The shock was still too raw for that. But she earned something far more valuable, a flicker of hope, a glimmer of respect. The ensuing months were a period of quiet, intense transformation. Amelia, with Mr. Chen as her mentor, proved to be a natural leader. She was decisive, empathetic, and had an artist's eye for talent and potential where others saw only data points. She dismantled the boys' club culture, promoting talented women to leadership positions and fostering an enthronement of genuine collaboration. Nexus began to stabilize, then to heal. She sold the monstrous Penthouse and bought a charming, light-filled house in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, a world away from the cold glamour of her former life. She turned one of the rooms into a nursery, painting murals of gentle animals and starry skies on the walls. In this sanctuary, she prepared for motherhood, finding a deep, quiet joy that had been absent from her life for so long. She was building a new life, a new company, and a new family, all on her own terms. Julian, meanwhile, existed in a self-imposed exile. The lawsuits were eventually settled, leaving him with a fraction of his former wealth, enough to live comfortably, but not enough to ever reclaim his place in the pantheon of the ultra-rich. He lived alone in a sterile modern apartment, his days unstructured and empty. He read philosophy, he took long, aimless walks. He sat for hours, staring at the city that had once been his kingdom. For the first time in his life, with all the distractions stripped away, he was forced to confront the man in the mirror, and he didn't like what he saw. He saw the insecurity that had driven his ambition, the ego that had fueled his betrayal, the hollowness at the core of his being. A week before Amelia's due date, he sent her a single handwritten letter. It contained no excuses, no justifications. It was just a simple, humble request to see her one last time, to say what he needed to say in person. After 2 days of deliberation, she agreed. They met in a public park, a neutral ground beneath the gentle shade of old oak trees. Julian was already there, sitting on a bench, looking shockingly ordinary. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by simple trousers and a sweater. The predatory confidence had been replaced by a quiet, weary sadness. Amelia approached her steps, slow and steady, her large, round belly leading the way. She didn't sit down. "Julian," she said, her voice soft without malice. He stood up, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. "Amelia, thank you for coming. You look beautiful, healthy." "I am," she replied simply. "I know I'm sorry isn't enough." He began, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I've said it to myself 1,000 times. What I did, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a failure of character, a failure of love. I was so terrified of being ordinary, of being second best, that I built this persona, this Julian Thorne, the visionary, and I started to believe it myself. I thought I needed more, something new and exciting, to prove to the world and to myself that I was extraordinary." He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a profound, soul-deep regret. "And the whole time, the most extraordinary thing in my life was right in front of me. You, our life, our son. I had everything, and I burned it all to the ground for the sake of my own vanity. I didn't just betray you, Amelia. I betrayed myself. I destroyed the best man I ever was, the man you married." Amelia listened in silence, her expression unreadable. She had expected excuses, perhaps even a final attempt at manipulation. She had not expected this raw, painful honesty. "I know there's no going back," he continued, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve to be a father. But I had to tell you this. I had to let you know that I see it. I finally see it all." A long silence hung between them, filled only by the rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children. "I'm glad you see it, Julian," Amelia said at last, her voice gentle but firm. "Not for my sake, but for yours. You have a long road ahead of you to figure out who you are without the money and the power." She took a breath. "Our son will be born next week. His name will be Theo, after my grandfather. He will know who his father is. I will show him pictures, I will tell him stories of the good times. I will not raise him on a foundation of anger." She took a step closer, her hand resting on her belly. "But he will also know the truth, not the sordid details, but the essential lesson. He will learn that integrity is the only currency that truly matters, He will learn that true strength is about kindness, not cruelty. And he will learn that a man's worth is measured by the promises he keeps. That will be your legacy to him, Julian. A lesson. She looked at him one last time, a flicker of the love that once was now transformed into a sad, distant compassion. I forgive you, Julian. I have to, for my own peace and for Theo's. But forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. Our story is over. With that, she turned and walked away, not looking back. She walked towards her future, towards her new life, towards the waiting arms of motherhood. Julian stood frozen watching her go until she was out of sight. He was alone, but for the first time he felt a flicker not of despair, but of something else. The devastating, painful and necessary beginning of penance. The ashes of his old life were behind him, and before him a vast empty landscape where perhaps something new and honest could finally begin to grow. And there you have it, a story that proves that hell hath no fury. Like a woman scorned, especially when that woman is smart, resourceful, and about to become the majority shareholder of her husband's company. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about avoiding heartbreak, but about how we rise from the ashes. It's a story of empowerment, of taking control of your own narrative, and of serving revenge, not hot, not cold, but with a controlling interest and a killer business plan.